Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I am here with another book chat. Sometime in the next month I will also be uploading a video on some of my favorite and influential female characters from when I was younger, but I thought I would take today to give some credit to the less aggressive or less traditionally strong female characters that I really enjoy, and to talk a little bit more about why we have that association, why we believe that physical strength is a necessity for being a strong or interesting or powerful woman. So when I hear the phrase strong female character, I tend to think of a particular kind of strength. This girl is probably an assassin or a killer or somebody on the run who has to face her past, standing in the blood of her enemies. I don't think I'm the only one who has that association, because over the last few years that has really become a popular archetype in YA fiction in particular. And there's nothing wrong with having that kind of female character. Like, those can be very interesting and compelling stories, and I'm not saying we shouldn't use them anymore. But I do feel like that particular brand of strong female character has sort of become an archetype for women, when really it should just be one of many different kinds of strength that is portrayed in fiction. Because being a strong woman can mean a lot of different things, in real life and in books. So I think that by limiting that to physical strength is sort of limiting what girls can be. So I'm just going to briefly mention a few examples of this phenomenon that I have come across pretty recently. And the first one is Katza from Graceling by Kestrel. Now, I love this book and I love Katza as a protagonist, and she is more in line with that kind of typical strong female character that I was mentioning earlier, because she is an assassin, she's a killer, she is literally blessed with the ability to kill. And I think that's a very kind of standard trope in YA fantasy. If there's a female main character, a lot of times she'll either be a princess or a killer, or sometimes both. But there are some ways that Katza kind of breaks the mold, and that's one of the reasons I love her. So yes, she has been brought up to be a killing machine, but her character development and the time when I really started connecting to her as a protagonist was when she started moving away from that, when she started trusting people and realizing that she could be more than somebody's execution machine, basically. Another thing I love about Katza is that she never comes off as a robot. It's not like she doesn't have feelings, it's just that she has grown up thinking that they were a weakness because of the way that she was brought up and the awful environment she was in, and it makes sense why she would see that as being a personal failing. The only complaint I sort of have about Katza is that she does sort of look down on things that are traditionally associated with females. Things like dresses and, spending time on yourself and long hair and things like that. Although I can kind of forgive it a little more in her case, because there are practical reasons that she doesn't like those things as well. Like it's harder for her to fight when she has long hair, things like that. But I will get into that feminine discussion a little bit later. And then we have characters like Kestrel from the Winner's Trilogy by Marie Rutkowski. Now, Kestrel grows up in a very military family and environment and culture, but she is not gifted in that way at all. Her strength is from her intellect and her creativity with problem solving. And despite the fact that she's not actually a warrior in the traditional sense of the word, she can be just as ruthless politically as some characters can be with a sword. At least in the two books that I've read from this trilogy so far. And then this one is not a recent read for me, but I would even venture to say that Elizabeth Bennet counts as a strong female character, despite the fact that she's not running around killing people. By refusing to marry a man she doesn't love, even to secure her and her family's comfort, she is doing a pretty radical thing for that time period. Seeing her work within the confines of her society and their rules, I think is actually one of the exciting things about reading Jane Austen, because her heroines are capable of doing so much with so little. They don't have a lot of options, and they still manage to have agency and make their own choices and seek happiness as much as they can. And I think that's admirable and something that's really interesting to read about. So I love all of those female characters. They're all favorites of mine, but for very different reasons. And I think that's something that is reflected in real life. You know, I admire people in real life for very different reasons. I have many female role models who I admire for different reasons. And I think that should be reflected in the fiction we read too. I believe we should be showing people, particularly young girls, that there are many different ways to be strong and worthwhile as a person, especially that there are very many ways that you can be a strong woman. You know, like, you don't have to be physically strong or violent, or there's also value in showing the quieter side of standing up for what you believe in. So another thing I really want to talk about that I feel very strongly about is the way that we treat things and traits that are traditionally considered feminine. And I sort of referenced this earlier when I was talking about Katza. But in general, one thing I want to see more often in books I read is not vilifying girls for liking things we associate with girls. I definitely understand where that comes from, because for so long women were forced into that box of feminine beauty and all of these very gender-specific things. But I think that by turning those things into the enemy, rather than people who would force those things on people, I think we're communicating the message that if we associate something with being feminine, it is inherently less worthy. And that's one of the main things that feminism should be fighting against, is this idea that somebody has the ability to tell you what you should or shouldn't do based on your sex or gender. Now, I do think that in the last couple of years, we're getting better about not portraying those things as negative. Especially in contemporaries, I have noticed less girl hate recently, which is really nice, but it's still something that I think we can work harder at. A book that I just finished a couple of days ago was 1,000 Nights by E.K. Johnston, and one of the things that I absolutely loved about this book was the fact that the main character's success and adventure is tied directly to women's work, to traits and abilities and skills that are traditionally associated with women. And this book doesn't discount that. In fact, using those things and respecting those things and working together with other women is directly tied to what the main character hopes to accomplish. And I loved that. It was so refreshing in a fantasy novel. Because like I said, I do think we're getting a little bit better about portraying that in more contemporary settings. But I do think that in fantasy or other genres in general, really, there still can be a tendency to paint a strong female character as diametrically opposed to a feminine character. Hopefully that last part made sense. I guess to sum up my last point, if you put down other women, particularly for doing things associated with women, then you're actually part of the problem. Okay, you guys, so those are some of my thoughts on strong female characters and the different ways that people can show agency, and just obviously there is a lot more to say about this topic. I just kind of wanted to address some things I had been thinking about lately, and especially with Feminist-led February going on, I've definitely been giving a lot of thought to topics like this. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this topic. You know, what do you think of when you hear that phrase, you know, strong female character? Because I am definitely, even after all of these things I've said, I'm still definitely guilty sometimes of hearing that phrase and having a particular image in mind. You know, sometimes when I read a synopsis, I will automatically assume something based on the way a girl is described, and that's kind of the whole problem. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!